friends, my name is Jess. Welcome to Books Past Bedtime. Today we are going to be talking about 15 of my favorite underrated books. Now, these are all books that I rated 5 stars that I feel just don't get enough love on BookTube and other bookish platforms. I hardly ever hear people talk about most of these books, and most of them have less than 5,000 ratings on Goodreads, but they are some of my favorites of all time, and I really wanted to share them with you today. These books aren't in any particular order, so let's just jump right in. The first book I want to talk about is The Miseducation of Cameron Post by Emily M. Danforth. This is a YA historical fiction / contemporary story following our main character, Cameron Post, as she deals with a lot of things in her life. One is that her parents have recently passed away and she is moving in with her conservative grandmother and aunt, and also Cameron is gay and she's coming to terms with what this means for her and also how to be gay in a world and in a situation where people do not want her to be gay. And when her grandmother and aunt actually find out that Cameron is gay, she is sent off to a conversion therapy camp. This book is really slow and it's definitely just a character study of Cameron, so if you're not into that kind of book, you might not be into this one, but personally I found this book to be very beautiful, very moving. I really came to relate to and connect with Cameron's character a lot, and this is really a good place to start too if you don't know a lot about conversion therapy and just the evil of conversion therapy and what it can do to a person. This book made me sob uncontrollably, but it also really left me with a feeling of hope, and I just would really recommend this book to everyone, and it has definitely earned its place in my top favorite books of all time. The next book I want to talk about is The Smell of Other People's Houses by Bonnie Hitchcock. This is a really short one, so it'd be good to read before the end of the year if you're a little bit behind on your Goodreads reading goal, but this is also a YA historical fiction / contemporary story. It is set in Alaska in 1970, and it follows 4 different characters whose lives become entangled. This deals with a lot of common issues, reconciling who you are at home with who you want to be, how to escape a situation that is no longer good for you, and also there's a character in this that deals with teenage pregnancy. There's a lot of different issues discussed in this book, and the story is really woven together so intricately and so beautifully. I really didn't know what to expect going into this story, but I ended up absolutely loving it. It is so moving and powerful and yet simple and beautiful, and as I mentioned before, it's a quick read. I also would recommend the audio. That's how I listen to it. It is a full cast and really immersive and such a great read. Next, I want to talk about The Lost and Found by Katrina Leno. This is a YA magical realism story, as are most of Katrina Leno's. This is definitely one that I don't hear talked about a whole lot though, but it is one of my favorites of hers, and it follows our 2 main characters, Franny and Louie, who meet in an online trauma survivors chat group, and ever since meeting online, they've been pen pals ever since. They've never met each other in real life and don't even know each other's real names. They only know their screen names, but they do know that they understand each other better than anyone else in their lives, and so they really have this very strong connection. And funnily enough, they also both have the tendency to lose things. And then this book kind of culminates in a road trip where both Franny and Louie decide to go to Austin, Texas and meet each other, and they kind of find themselves and things they've lost along the way. And this is just a really beautiful, moving story, and it honestly surprised me a lot by how much I enjoyed it. Franny and Louie are both such fun characters, and I always love the atmospheres that Katrina Leno is able to create with her writing, just so whimsical and magical, and I loved this book so much, and I think it deserves a little bit more love. Next, I want to talk about The Wicker King by Kay Ancrum. I actually read this book recently, so I've talked about it a little bit on my channel, but I wanted to include it in this list as well because it definitely deserves more hype and more love. So this is also a YA magical realism story. It follows these 2 boys, August and Jack, and when Jack starts having hallucinations, August is really determined to help Jack cope, and Jack kind of believes that in order to get these hallucinations to go away, he has to fulfill this prophecy in this fantasy hallucinatory world, and August is determined to help even though it might not be the best of ideas, but at the core of it, that's not what this book is really about. This book is about friendship and trauma and survival, friendships and how we fill those gaps in our lives. This is also probably not the book for everyone, but this is just the kind of book I love, so I know that there's an audience for it out there. It is told in a multimedia style format, which I genuinely really love, and it also makes it a really quick read. The story is hard-hitting, gut-wrenching, and honestly really weird, but it really takes an honest look at mental illness and how people might cope and compensate in the face of neglect. And while August and Jack's relationship is definitely a little bit toxic, they really care so deeply for each other, and this book leaves you feeling hopeful, and August and Jack will honestly live in my head rent-free forever. I really loved them as characters, and I really loved this story. story. Next, I want to talk about 𝗏𝗏 by Abigail Tartellin. This is probably one of my favorite books of all time, if not my absolute favorite book of all time, and definitely not enough people talk about this book. This book is literally incredible. So this is an adult contemporary following the Walker family, and the Walker family is really good at keeping secrets from the world, and they are even better at keeping them from each other. The main focus of this story is the character Max, who is the son in this family, and he's considered the golden boy. He's thought to be perfect. His younger brother is really envious of him. He's thought to be like the favorite child, but Max also has a huge secret that the world might not be ready for. This really is a tale of a family crisis. It's also a coming of age story. It is so emotional, it will rip you apart. If you're interested in this book, definitely look up the trigger warnings. I wasn't really expecting going into it how difficult this book would be to read. So if you are sensitive to sexual assault scenes, parents with questionable morals, abuse in general, bullying, those kinds of things are all included in this book. So definitely check out the trigger warnings before you check out this book. I will also leave them down below in the description. But this book totally broke me. It left me feeling empty, but at the end also hopeful. I really don't know if I've ever cried so much over a book in my entire life. This book and The Book Thief are definitely in the running for my favorite books of all time, and also in the running for books that have made me cry the most. But I think I really loved this story because it feels so real and so raw. Like, it just feels like you could be reading about any family on the street and this is how they would react to these situations. The characterization was just amazing in this book. While all of the characters kind of made questionable decisions, you kind of understood where they were coming from no matter what, which really made them just such strong characters and interesting people to read about. I really just want to share this book with everyone and think it is very important for honestly everyone to read, and it just gives me so many feelings and emotions. Please read this book. It is literally incredible, and also it's so beautiful, so I recommend you buy it. Another book that devastated me that does not get near enough love is Far From the Tree by Robin Benway. This is a YA contemporary story, and it follows 3 different viewpoints of 3 biological siblings who are all either adopted or put into the foster care system, and throughout the course of the story they find each other and start to build relationships with one another. And what I love most about this book is it really makes you as a reader take a hard look at the realities of certain situations that people deal with every day, such as teenage pregnancy, growing up in foster care, and biological versus adopted versus found families, and what all those things can mean in a person's life. This is a really heartbreaking, rich, eye-opening story, and I really loved it. It really means a lot to me. This audiobook is also excellent if you are looking for a good audiobook. Switching gears a little bit, I want to talk about Rock by Anyata Sunday. This is, I think, an indie published romance male-male story, and it's honestly a little bit taboo as it is about 2 stepbrothers falling in love. Yes, it's kind of weird, but also it's kind of amazing. I devoured this book. I loved it so much, and the author really handled the moral quandary quite well, in my opinion. It really was a major focus of the story. This was the main conflict, whether they should actually be together or not. And so if the premise in general doesn't immediately turn you off, I would really recommend this one. It was very good, and honestly probably one of the best male-male romances I have read recently. The next book also includes male-male representation, and that is It Looks Like This by Rafi Mittelfeld. This is a YA contemporary, and it is following our main character Mike as he is trying to figure himself out under the watchful eye of his uber conservative father. Mike ends up meeting this new boy Sean, and they start to form a friendship, maybe a little bit something more, but Mike's father seems to know all, as do Mike's homophobic classmates, and then something terrible happens and really just shifts the dynamics of everything. This is a really also sad, hard-hitting book. If you didn't already know, I kind of like that kind of thing. That is why there's this theme running through this video, because my favorite books are often hard-hitting and heartbreaking books. But this one is really good. It really deserves more readers. It's just a beautiful slice of life, very touching story. I would implore everyone to read it. Another book that I really want more people to read is Wolf by Wolf by Ryan Grodin. This is a YA alternative historical fiction book with some fantasy elements. It is honestly one of the most unique things I've ever read, and so interesting and so cool. So this follows our main character Yael, who is a shapeshifter who was experimented upon in German death camps during the Holocaust. But because this is an alternative historical fiction, Hitler actually won World War II and is still in control. And so Yael, because of her extraordinary talent, is tasked with assassinating Hitler, and she goes on this motorcycle race because the winner of this motorcycle race gets to meet Hitler in person, and that is the opportunity that her and the rebel movement backing her have been waiting for. So this is really an action-packed story. So interesting, as I said before, so unique, very fast-paced, will keep you on the edge of your seat, and it's so criminally underrated that it's honestly offensive. The characters are so complex and really blur the lines between good and evil. It literally has everything you could ever want in a book and is one of my all-time favorites. Now, this book has definitely been gaining a little bit more traction, I would like to think partially because of me, and that is Ivy Aberdeen's Letter to the World by Ashley Herring Blake. This is actually a middle grade queer contemporary story following our main character Ivy. Her family kind of loses everything in Hurricane Katrina. They are displaced and Ivy actually feels really ignored in the aftermath. Her family just has a lot going on. She's no longer the youngest kid. Her younger siblings are getting more attention. Her sister is off with new people, new friends. She really feels lonely and doesn't really know what to do. Her family actually forgets her birthday, which is so devastating. So I definitely understand where she is coming from and why she feels unseen. But Ivy is also dealing with the fact that she thinks she might like girls and have a crush on this girl. And she really doesn't feel like she has anyone in her life that can help her deal with this and understand this and come to terms with this. Honestly, nothing can make me sob like an Ashley Herring Blake middle grade story. And this one is obviously no different. Ivy is such a great character and I really feel like every reader can connect to her in some way. I'm sure we all kind of felt like Ivy as a child, trying to figure things out, feeling like nobody was there for us. And her story is just one that will really stay with me and I think it will live in my heart for a very long time. Next, I want to talk about If I'm Being Honest by Emily Webberley and Austin Sigmund Broca. This is a YA contemporary romance following our main character Cameron, who is kind of the queen bee, head of the school, and she definitely has a reputation for being a bitch, like many popular girls. But in order to win over her crush, she decides she needs to kind of reinvent herself, become a nice person again, and so she goes around trying to right her wrongs, apologize to the people she has hurt in her past. And she starts with this boy named Brendan, and at first Brendan isn't receptive at all to Cameron, but they kind of start to form a friendship, and so Cameron eventually wins him over, and then she starts to fall for him. I really loved this book. It was so well written and easy to read. It really surprised me how much I loved this one. This author duo definitely gets some buzz around BookTube, but honestly not as much as they're worth, I think. I have read another book by them and kind of hated it, but that's because it had cheating issues in it. This one though was very strong, such a good, cute story, and perfect if you're looking for a fun, light contemporary story. Next, I want to talk about Girls Like Us by Randy Pink. This is a YA historical fiction, and it is set in the summer of 1972, and it follows 4 very different girls who are all connected because they are affected by teenage pregnancy. These 4 girls' stories are all woven together into one larger story about a woman's right to choose her own future. This book definitely does not get enough hype for what it is. This is such a beautiful and powerful story, and it is by far one of the actually most underrated books on this list. I believe it only has 407 reviews on Goodreads from the time that I wrote this list, which is way too few. This book has been out for over a year already, and so I really think more people really need to start picking this book up. It made my heart ache, it made me laugh, it made me cry, and it really left me feeling hopeful. This is such an amazing story. I really implore you to pick it up. Also, Randy Pink is a Black author and she has written such a beautiful story. We should go show her support. This is such a great book. Please pick it up. And another middle grade on this list is The Year We Fell from Space by Amy King, who is also A.S. King, who writes YA contemporary stories. But as I mentioned, this is another hard-hitting middle grade. It follows our main character Liberty, whose family is kind of falling apart around her. Her parents end up getting divorced and it takes a while for her dad to get back into contact with her, and when he finally does, she's not really sure if she wants to let him back in her life. And Liberty really wants to bring her family back together, but she feels a bit out of control herself. Just like all the rest of these books on this list, this is such a great story. It is so moving and powerful. It really also made me cry, made me so emotional, but is also so hopeful. This book is just so real and raw, and it really feels true to the 12-year-old narrative voice of the story. I really can't get Liberty out of my head. This is such a great story. It really is going to stick with me for a very long time, and I think it will with you as well. Now, this next book is written by a not so underrated author, but this is one of his more underrated works that I think deserves more attention, and that is Bruiser by Neil Shusterman. This is a YA magical realism story. It follows our main character Bronte, who starts dating this boy named Bruiser, who is known around school as the guy most likely to get the death penalty. So he obviously doesn't have a very good reputation, but then strange things begin to occur and we come to learn that Bruiser actually has the power to heal people, but everything turns out to be a little bit more than they bargained for. I really loved the story so much. I thought it was engaging and powerful and moving moving, and I really think if you love Neal Shusterman or you hate him, you definitely will find something to love in this story. It really is one of my favorite books that Neal Shusterman has written. And then finally, I have another underrated book from a not so underrated author, and that is The Scorpio Races by Maggie Stiefvater. This is definitely Maggie's most slept on book, but it is probably my favorite of hers. I love this book so much, and I just want everybody to read it because it is so cool and so unique. It is another YA magical realism / fantasy, which Maggie just does so well, and it follows our main characters Shauna and Puck, and in Shauna and Puck's world there is this thing called the Scorpio Races every year, and in the Scorpio Races, riders ride water horses and just try to hang on for dear life until they cross the finish line. This is a very dangerous event. Some riders live, some riders die. Shawn is the returning champion, and Puck is the first girl to ever enter the Scorpio Races, and she is in no way prepared for what's about to happen. So one of my favorite things about this story is the atmosphere. The atmosphere of this story is honestly unmatched. This would be the perfect fall or winter read. It definitely has that kind of feel and vibe to it, and Maggie Stiefvater really just has a way with words unlike any other. She is such a talented author and creates such amazing and interesting worlds. She really transports you to this island, and you can feel this cold sea salt wind on your face and hear the horse's hooves galloping. It's such a sensory experience reading Maggie Stiefvater's writing, and you just get so immersed in it. And Shawn and Puck are two of my all-time favorite characters. I love them so much. And this book is so criminally underrated that it pains me. So that is my list of 15 of my favorite underrated books. Let me know down below if you've read any of these books, and also let me know some of your favorite underrated books. I would love to know. I would love to check them out. Always looking for new recommendations. But thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate you being here with me. All relevant links will be in the description down below, including my Instagram handle, which is where I'm most active other than YouTube, if you would like to give me a follow and keep up with my day-to-day life and reading. But that is going to be all for me today. Thank you again for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.